welcome to another episode of the More Than a Game podcast, the podcast all about life and leadership through the lens of Australian basketball. And with me on the podcast today is former NBL champion Oscar Forman. Oscar spent 17 seasons playing in the NBL and played a grand total of 513 NBL games, which is the 11th most games in NBL history. He had an incredible three-point shot, an incredible three-point shooter. He hit 904 three-pointers in his career, which ranks as the 13th most in NBL history. Just a remarkable achievement. He won the NBL championship in his rookie year with the Adelaide 36ers. He spent time with the New Zealand Breakers and finished his career with the Illawarra Hawks. He's played for his country. He played for the Boomers on a number of occasions. And since retiring from the sport, he's a commentator with the NBL. He's a corporate speaker, now working for the University of Wollongong as their Global Sports Program Coordinator. He's had a great career up until this point, and we look forward to hearing more of his story today on the More Than a Game podcast. Oscar Forman, welcome to the More Than a Game podcast.
Happy to be here.
Great to see you, mate, and looking sharp, still looking fit. A retired basketballer, so how's things since retiring?
Pretty good. Still run around on Thursday at lunchtime with a couple of the boys here at university. I mean, no one's playing at any elite levels, but it's a bit of fun and it keeps everyone in some sort of shape. Yeah,
that's good to hear. You still look like you can be playing, so still hitting them as good as ever, I imagine.
Yeah, look, it's funny when you start playing just in a casual, not even a competition. It's just whenever someone books a court here at lunchtime on a Thursday and we jump down. No pressure. You start hitting a few shots, and you kind of do wonder, could I still play a little bit? But you know what? After 17 years of not having weekends off, weekends are amazing. I now understand what everyone goes on about with how good weekends are.
I can imagine. I've always sort of thought about, even because the season is in summer, like you guys don't even get a chance to go away over that summer period, I imagine, because you're traveling so much, and that in itself must be good to be able to have summer holidays and enjoy the best that Australian summer has to offer.
Well, I guess I was a little bit different to a lot of other players who would live and breathe it. I would put obviously my time into basketball, but I'd make sure that in the first half of my career, I guess I was playing back-to-back. So I was playing the off-season as well. And then I was playing, when I moved to New Zealand, I was playing the off-season there. But as soon as I had one of my ankle surgeries and I was forced to miss the off-season, it was great. It was great not playing. And then the next year I did my other ankle and I had that time off, and it was really just great for your mind, not only your body but your mind. And then after that, I just started taking the off-seasons off and just travelling. So I'd basically, throughout the year, look forward to my off-season. I'd plan it to when I had to be back, when the coach said, all right, you have to be back on this date. And I'd travel up. I'd basically fly in a few days before that, and I'd just go to America or Europe and go hiking and get away and see how long I could stretch my budget for and take 2 to 3 months off. Usually I'll travel the first half by myself and then, friend or meet up with people and then travel the second half with them. And I'd always stay active. So it wasn't getting back to shape wasn't an issue, but I'd make sure I travel. So I'd just chase endless summers really.
That's awesome. Well, we'll go into these 17 seasons in the NBL. I guess you grew up in Adelaide and ended up playing for your hometown club, and you played with some great names in those years with the Adelaide 36ers, Brett Maher, Willie Farley, Jacob Holmes, just to name a few. But we'll come to that in just a moment. But I'm interested. I always ask my guests this question: where did it start for you? Where did that passion for basketball come from? And how did you start playing the game of basketball?
From my family, from my parents. Mum and dad played socially, and they enjoyed it. Used to play one-on-one with my brother. My sister liked basketball, but no one to really any elite level or anything like that. I remember Dad used to be the coach in primary school. He was very fair, even if I would score a lot. Still, everyone, either the high numbers, would start, or the low numbers. So if whatever your jersey number was, that's whether you started or number. It was very fair. Rotational, everyone got the exact same amount of minutes. And then I was playing with Sturt Sabres, as a junior. Played, every second year with Jacob Holmes because he was a year younger than me.
Right.
He was definitely a talent as a junior, and then later, Joe Ingles came through the same club a couple of years later than us. So it was, a strong club with good coaches. Jason Williams was one of the pros on my team at Adelaide, and he was coaching me as a junior and even at my high school. So it kind of started there, and I played because I loved it. That's one thing, and I always said when I turned pro, I always said I'll play until two things happen. One, I stop getting paid, and to play, and the other way is if I stop loving it. And they happened about the same year for me, which was lucky. So I didn't really make any difficult decisions on retirement.
That's incredible, mate. And it's so good to see that backstory and that passion that I guess drives you throughout those years in the NBL. But going back to your first season, you actually won the comp in your first season, and you hear that so often. I guess with rookies that have won it and they think it's so easy, but it takes, sometimes they don't get to a grand final again. But again, you play with some great players in those early years with the Adelaide 36ers. We're coached by the legendary Phil Smythe. What was it like in those early years, and what did you learn being in that program at the Adelaide 36ers back then?
It's funny. I kind of almost had my coaches around backwards the way I went through. Like Gordy McLeod was a very, at Illawarra was a very regimented coach, and he was very skills-based coach, and he would have been someone that would have been great for me early on. Like, he was a great coach for me as it was, but he would have been great early on. Phil was a coach who I would have loved to have again in my last couple of years, because he was just an absolute player's coach, and roll the balls out. Trainings were fun, but it also made my first few years really enjoyable, because it was all about, trainings are, warm up, roll the ball out, play 5-on-5, just different scenarios, different games. Him and Steve Breeny and Scott Minnis, great basketball minds. But they definitely did make it fun. It also gave me an unrealistic expectation of, this is easy, because we did have such a good core and such a good nucleus of a team that it was very player driven as well. Like you had your workhorses like Mark Nash and Rupert Stackwell and Paul Rees and David Stiff, those kind of guys that really did push every ounce, and they kind of had a lot of voices. Then you had your stars of Willie Farley, as you said, and Brett Maher. They kind of were the scorers, but I think it was that nucleus that really pushed and did all the engine room work to win games as well. So it was a little bit unrealistic, because rock up, you win your first season, you think, this is easy, like you said, and then you find out later how hard it is to get back. But also what it did was show me that I see each year in the NBL, you kind of look at the teams, and culture matters. It's not about buying players. That first year, a lot of those guys weren't on big money. They were the ones that, they were the workhorses, and they made sure they got everything across the line. And even when I went to Wollongong, we had a lot of starters on very, very low money, but what we did was we built a core that worked hard, played for each other, and were quite disciplined. And then we looked at the neighbours up the road of the Kings, and they were more about trying to buy the places and buy the people rather than develop them and build that core that would stick around for a long time. It was more kind of players came in and out and jumped around rather than, I think we had at Illawarra, I played 8 years there. Larry Davidson played 10 years. Reece Martin played 10 years. Conrad, he's back playing again now, so he's probably on 11 or 12 or whatever it is. Dave Gruber played a bunch. Demos, Jackson. You had a bunch of guys that played for quite a long time, and that meant that we would each year would pull in new imports, and we just had our engine room that just kept ticking over, and we made sure that we would get round about where it was each year. And then really developed on, depending on who our imports were, to whether we could push further or not.
Absolutely. You mentioned the development of players there, and I guess when you look at the NBL now, it doesn't seem to be that many players that have come through, and like yourself, growing up in Adelaide and then playing for the Adelaide 36ers, I guess you're in that development space now with players. And how do you think the NBL goes about developing its players? Is there, I know there's, for New South Wales, obviously got the NBL 1 now coming through and that, but are the development pathways sufficient in this country at the moment, do you think?
Well, I think the fact that the world's got smaller and just global now is a huge thing. You know, if you look at the NBA and you look at who used to be in the NBA, you had, back in the day it was just Americans, and then it kind of went to then the Europeans came through when Dirk made noise, and then LeBron year when Darko Milicic goes number 2. So the European invasion kind of happened then. Then it kind of went to the Chinese when Yao came through, and they looked at Sun Yue and Yi Jian, even Mengi Patir from Mongolia, he came on. So they kind of had that Asian wave through there, and whether that was a marketing thing as well. I was going, hey, above the river, some of the Chinese are quite tall, and there was a lot of development going through China at that time. And then off the tail of that, then Gorge and Bill Tomlinson, those guys go over and coach in China for a number of years too. Then it kind of went to the Australians. So they realised that, you had a bunch of the Australians that were early, had probably, Paddy Mills, Delhi, when those guys went over and they started getting noticed as they're good teammates, they're no trouble, they're hard workers, that, they'll play hard, and so there is nothing that detracts them from the team. They just bring positives only. So I feel that the NBA kind of started looking at Australians, which is why a lot of those other guys got to look at, and why we have so many Australians. And at the same time, it was about 18 to 20 years after the NBL boomed over here. So you have the 18th birthdays of Ben Simmons and Dante Exum and those kind of guys that then got our Australians from our imports that came over. So that really goes to that boom. And the next boom they're looking at the moment is the Sudanese community that's refugees that come over, and especially in South Australia. And then you've got ex-players like Rashad Tucker working on academies, and KB and those dudes, and that kind of really now bring in the body types with the professional coaching. And then we are seeing a lot of the Sudanese community actually quite developing quite quickly. And even if you look at the Hawks team and you look at the NBL, there are a couple of Sudanese on each roster that are just showing their length and playing quite well now. So I think when it comes back to the pathways, because the world's got smaller and more accessible, in my day it was go to the AIS, try and make it, try and play 2 years, and then try and go to Europe and have a good career in Europe if you can, or the NBL, or if you're that 1%, maybe get a look at the NBA. Now the mentality seems to be go to college, and from college you might get recruited to them, you might get in the draft. Or there's a lot happening with the draft and different names, and you see how many Australian names get into the draft each year, or even the D League or the G League, is now an option as well with 2-way contracts, and guys like Jock Landale being very close to it, and Will Magnay going across and coming back, or there's been a bunch of isn't Isaac Humphries going across there. So it does seem smaller, so that seems like a very viable pathway for that top tier. That wasn't like that 20 years ago, and I think that has developed. In terms of pathways here, I'm not as in touch with all that sort of stuff. I do see the development players on rosters, and see how they are changing over time. But also, to be honest, I feel that a lot of people don't. They underestimate the hard work that goes into becoming a professional, really.
So what is some of that hard work then? I've heard stories of some of the, habits that players have formed as they've tried to make it. But from your point of view, if there's any young players listening, what does it take to become a professional basketballer in this country?
You know what? I think if someone told people up front here's the blueprint of what you have to do if you want to make it, if you're not guaranteed to make it, to have a shot at making it, I think most people would say that looks too hard. As it is, it is difficult. It is building habits. Forming habits is one of the first things. And I think the amount of work that goes into honing your skill and your craft is tremendous. I know, back at the AIS, I used to shoot 500 shots a day.
Wow.
I know people that would, it's not just, and to try and stay committed during those, say, 500 to 1,000 shots, it's not just shooting them. Anyone can shoot 500 shots. It's shooting good quality of the same form. To myself, even when I shoot now, I'll have people say, oh, your shot looks exactly the same every time. To me, when I shoot, it feels different every time. But the fact that it looks the same to them is the fact that I've shot all those shots with exactly the same form, and I've made sure I was strict on it. It's sacrifices that people make, and a lot of people don't want to make the right sacrifices. I mean, there's been countless people over my career. Like, I remember Albert Schweitzer's tournament over in Germany, and there was a kid from Germany, and I remember seeing him at the time thinking, this guy is the best player I've ever seen. He has to go to the NBA for sure. He is that unbelievable. Never seen him again in my life.
Wow.
Never heard about him. And I have zero idea whatever happened to him. I just know he didn't go pro in the NBA. I have no idea what happened. I have no idea if he just wasn't committed, if life happened to him, or what he got swallowed up by. But it's very difficult to make it, and it's very difficult even within yourself to stay committed. And it is the sacrifices of, what do you want to do? Do you want to put time and effort into it? It's not purely just, I'm going to shoot 1,000 shots. Is your technique do you actually, can you listen to coaches? Can you find and seek out help of people that are better and smarter than you in certain areas? And if you do want to be a shooter, you go find a shooter, or you go find a coach that is better than you, that you then, can take advice. Secondly, can you listen and actually do it? It's one thing to do it when a coach is watching. It's a whole other thing to do it when no one's watching, because it's not that fun putting all the work in when 0 people are watching you, and it may not turn out to be good. But I tell you, at the end of the game, when people shoot shots that matter in front of a crowd, they've done that shot numerous times when no one's seen them at all. It's not the first time they shoot the shot. And I don't think people really get the grasp of that going, okay, here's so-and-so, they shot a game winner, and go, oh, that was lucky it went in. I think Elon Musk actually got that question recently, and someone said, oh, you're lucky you're so smart. And he said, your company's so good. And I work 16 hours a day, 6 hours, 6 days a week. That's not luck. That's just, and anytime someone says, oh, you're lucky you can shoot so well, I get a bit insulted, because it's not luck. They're discrediting all the hard work I did to get to the point where I was with my shot.
Yeah. Well, mate, it's so cool. And I guess you made a name for yourself with that 3-point shot, and growing up watching the sport as a young guy too, like, you were one of the guys that, could shoot it and made a career out of it. And I guess just going back to those early years, and you started in 2002, around that time, finished only a couple of years ago, but in that time you would have seen a lot of, I guess, the NBL evolve over that time, and I guess you started right at the time where it started to go downhill a little bit. It rode that wave for the 90s. For some reason, after the 2000 Olympics, the NBL in this country sort of stagnated, and just wasn't as popular as it once was. But in the last few years in the NBL, you saw it obviously take off again, and those crowds came back, and the investment, the sponsorship dollars came back into the sport. What do you put that down to in that time? Was it just a matter of having good owners in place, or, that NBL chopped and changed with teams, so many teams came and went? What do you put the success of the NBL down to now, as opposed to when you first came into the league?
You know what? I always actually ask myself that. Looking back, I knew I came in just at the end of the wave, and my career started at the downturn of the NBL and finished as the upturn. Pretty much, I was in that. If you look at the longitudinal wave of it, I was in the wrong time. But a lot of it flows on from the NBA. The success on the NBA, and then the interest of that, obviously, with the Aussie guys we have in the NBA and the marketability there. Then that flows on a little bit to the players we get in here. I do think there were a few issues financially with different owners that would have caused some trouble over the years, and teams, as you said, teams chopping and changing. I think I played in a season. I did play in a season where there were 13 teams, and it was the top 8 made the finals, and then I played in seasons where the top 4 made the finals out of only 8 teams. So, I played in seasons where it's there's a 1-game knockout in the playoffs. And it's each year having teams in and out. The governors had to work out what to do. Obviously now with Larry with control of the NBL, he's put a tremendous amount of money in there and built it well and is still building it. So I think it's great to see some sort of success from his efforts, because without someone like him, it would have struggled. And it is frustrating when you hear a lot of people banging on about how he owns these teams and owns this and it's an unfair league. Nothing's going to be completely fair, and there are different amounts of money involved in things. And like you look at the NBA. LeBron goes to the Lakers. He didn't go to Memphis. He doesn't want to live in Memphis. Simple as that. Like it's some good players are going to go to Melbourne because the dollars might be in Melbourne, but also they might not want to live in Townsville or Singapore or any of these other places that had existed. So you've got a bit of that. So that's the landscape. And we lived in Wollongong, which was close to Sydney. We didn't live in Sydney, but we lived there because instead of getting stuck in traffic, we wanted to go swim at the beach. So there are positives to everything. And then when it is game time, you're a small market team, so you do take a bit of that. So I think Larry, he does get credit for what he's done, but I think he can have more credit for what he's done with the league. He's done a fantastic job. And now there's a bit more governance and strictness about who can own, it seems. So hopefully it doesn't dive, and hopefully it stays, at a strong level. And then we're seeing a lot of, interest from, NBA players having potential, part ownerships of clubs and that kind of interest. I think that can only be a good thing. And then when we do have, kind of like LaMelo Ball come down, and then you see the fanfare from that, those things, and then these, Giddy going to the draft and getting recognised. Those kind of things I think will really help for this league, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the league has to be careful not to lose momentum, I guess. In similar ways, the A-League or Australian soccer has seen that sort of growth when the A-League kicked off, had a rough season as well, reformed as the A-League, and now we're seeing, I guess, declining crowds, and it's going back down the path that it did when the NSL sort of went. So I guess we want to avoid that. But again, as you said, the big part of that is making the teams, operational, functional. We don't want to see teams, coming in and then going out again. I think it was a big part of the demise. And one of those teams that came in was the New Zealand Breakers, and you joined them a few years after they were formed and established. What were those years like? But also being part of such a new club, a club trying to form its own identity. What did you take away from your seasons with the New Zealand Breakers after moving on from Adelaide?
Yeah, look, it was a big decision for me of whether to go to New Zealand or stay in Adelaide. And in the end, I thought about it for the year before, and I decided not to. And then the thing that actually pushed me to go there was just getting out of my comfort zone. That was my biggest thing. I needed to be out of my comfort zone to grow as a person, to be able to grow as a player. I loved it over there. I really did. New Zealand's fantastic. New Zealand holds a very, very special place in my heart. And anytime I meet a Kiwi now, like I get very excited talking about my time there because I absolutely loved it. Like if I find out they're from Auckland or the North Shore or out west or wherever, I just have so many good memories. The first year, it was difficult. But the thing that was good with the owners, anytime you talk to anyone about the Breakers from within that 10-year period, they'll always mention Paul and Liz Blackwell. They were fantastic owners. They were really good people. I mean, I got cut from 1 year into a 3-year contract, and yet I'll still for the few years after, I would fly in with Illawarra, and then after team dinner, I would grab a team bus and go over to their house and just sit down and have a chat with them until it was time to go to bed. They're just great people. If they came to Adelaide for a game, they'd catch up with my parents. There's not many owners that I would hold in, that close regard, let alone owners that fired me. Like that just speaks, I think, of how they are. That they recruited on. They were nice people. When it came to Christmas time, they would have, the morning until 1 o'clock was Orphans Christmas. If you couldn't get home to see family, or you didn't have family over, they opened their doors and they held a Christmas for everyone. Whenever you sign there, they gave a small little hamper to you for each year.
Wow.
Just a little stuff, just all the little things. They were really hospitable, just really, really good people. We still chat to this day. New Zealand, Andre Lamanis, and he was Dorge at the start, and then it was Vickerman and Judd Flavel. Andre was just coming into his first head coaching role, and so he was quite hard with what he wanted, because he wanted to, stamp his authority on things, but he was also a really fun coach. It was kind of a work hard, and then you got respect from him. I really enjoyed it, and to see him develop as a coach, from his first year, I was there for 4 years, my first year there to my last year there, he had changed and improved so much as a coach, and he was someone that always wanted to better himself, and his basketball knowledge was great. And then how he, over this first year, his relinquishing, he had a few issues with relinquishing control over things, whereas over the last couple, he would really rely on his assistant coaches and give them leeway, which was very good. And I'd always make little deals with him too. We made it, we'd make a deal that if we won 5 in a row, we were allowed to go to Wet and Wild once we played at the Gold Coast, and games like that. So
nice.
He was, or if we beat a team by a certain amount of points, we're allowed to have training off on Monday or whatever. So and things, because I do feel that coaches a lot of the time will train too hard and too long, and usually if you lose a game, the next game is okay, we've got to do more. Then you lose 2, and as soon as what I find interesting in coaches' mentality is the wave of as soon as they're winning or losing, if they lose a few games, they go, okay, we've got to go harder, because it's counterintuitive to lighten off and freshen bodies up. Got to correct, got to make sure that everyone, that what they know is imparted to what the player knows for on the court, because they can only control a game so many times, whereas it's the players that once the game starts, the players really control the game. So, they really want to go harder and harder. So what I do find with a lot of coaches is they've got first few losses, let's train more and harder, and then after you're on a skid of 5-6 games, it's like, oh, that's not working. Let's lighten it off now. And I do feel that Andre, as he got further into the head coaching role, he started looking at things a little bit differently, because he did spend some time with the Spurs and with Popovich, and that's what he liked. He started to kind of emulate that, and he was close with Brett Brown. So, his coaching style kind of emulated that a little bit and was a bit different, which I liked, enjoyed.
Yeah, it's great. I think I was going to ask this question a bit later on, but I'll ask it now in terms of good coaching and what makes a good coach. And you mentioned about the intuition to either rest players or to go hard. I think when you hear of, the Brian Gorgins of the world, even the Wayne Bennett's in the NRL, they know what players need. And you mentioned Phil Smyth being a great man manager as well. But, you've had some great coaches as well, successful coaches, Rob Beveridge, Gordy McLeod and the like. So you've had a broad spectrum. What does it take to be a great coach at this level? And is it a case where you need to, embrace this great man management style, or do coaches just need to embrace what they're good at? So, what is it that makes a good coach, at the NBL level in particular?
Well, I've kind of had, I think I've had a who's who of coaches, really.
I reckon.
In terms of head coaches, I've had Phil Smyth, Gordy McLeod, Rob Beveridge, Gorgon, Brett Brown, Gordy McLeod. I pretty much had a selection of, the best coaches from Australia. And doesn't matter which one is, I've always asked the question, I'm like, are head coaches born crazy or do they become crazy? Because I tell you what, all of them are absolutely batshit crazy. And I don't know I don't know which comes first, but what does it take? It takes a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of behind the scenes effort. Like becoming a player, people think, to be a coach, you just need to sit up there and sub. Subbing in is probably the least of the worries. Like I think a great coach is one that doesn't need to be seen to doing anything. I mean, Andre, I say a lot about Andre, but Andre was, I asked him one time and I said, I talked about coaching. He goes, the most important part of coaching is, coaching is 90% recruiting. Because if I recruit the horses, you can run.
Wow. Yeah. Because
if I could recruit the right people, you would do what I say. And when it comes to the game, and then you'll also get your own spin and understand what happens. Like look who you recruit in those times, like Dylan Boucher or Paul Hanari or CJ Bruton. Those guys on the fly would work it all out. Kirk would turn up and he would just do what Kirk wanted to do. But he didn't do it in a bad way. He was always a positive way, and he's like, okay, we're going to go hard at this time. We're going to cruise at this time. That's what Kirk wanted. And everyone understood Kirk was a star, and he got results. So this is how Kirk's thinking was. CJ's like, we're going to have fun at this time. We're going to work hard at this time. And they all brought different stuff to it.
Yeah.
Look at, Glenn Saville. Geez, at 37 years old or whatever he was the first one in there, the last one to leave. He was the hardest one. Like even in a boring drill, he would not be missing a step. He had utmost respect for his coaches. He would always. It's very hard in a long season, and grueling trainings and pre-season. The boys will always go for coffee or lunch after, and it's only a matter of time until someone will talk about rag on the coach for a little bit, because that's part of it, because you get through it. I cannot tell you one time when Saville actually ever said anything negative about a coach.
Yeah, that's great.
And even if someone did try and involve him, he was like, they've got their reasons. And his conversation would be about something different. Just absolute pro. Like, he played for tough coaches, and Gorge was the toughest. Very, very tough, but he did it. And one of the things that got me through my first Boomers camp, when I knew Gorge was going to be absolutely on me non-stop, was that someone said, if Gorge yells at you and if he's on you, he likes you because he thinks you've got potential. And it's true. I've never seen a coach just come yell at someone just because they're having a bad day. Sometimes that's a byproduct, but they don't just, if you can't. No, I haven't seen a coach yell at Dylan Boucher for, not being able to shoot 3-pointers. Shoot 3-pointers. So they don't yell at him for it. They'll yell at him for not playing defense because they know he can play defense very well. Yeah. So the coaches are actually trying to get, the better of you, get something better out of you, sorry. Yeah. So, look, what becomes, I think there's a lot of behind the scenes, watching film, watching tapes, just talking to watching other, because no one creates offenses. Everything's stolen. Yeah. Created the shuffle, and they just steal it from someone else. It's just what works for that playing group. So, they do watch a lot of European games, a lot of NBA games to work out what, there's a triangle. Is the triangle still going to work in this era? Is the triangle going to work with the personnel we have? Yeah. Fitting those things into their system, really.
No, that's great insight, mate. I find it is an art, and I guess you're right. Are they crazy or what? Because it takes a lot to be a head coach, I imagine. But I guess going back to, you mentioned playing under Gorge, making the Boomers squad and representing your country, which is no doubt a huge achievement in itself. And I guess those New Zealand years, did you win a competition in the end? Were you part of that three-peat for the Breakers, or did you come?
No. I left the year before.
Right.
I would have loved one more year with them. There was, I think, some personnel changes, and training the squad went from quite tense about making sure they didn't stuff up rather than looking at the positive side of things. And by all, when I chatted to the guys after, there's other years that, like, man, it's just so lighthearted, and I would have really liked to have been involved in something like that. Unfortunately, I wasn't. But then over in Wollongong, it was, we had a bit of that mix as well.
For sure. Because the reason I asked the question, as you said, you enjoyed your time there. You played in New Zealand NBL while you were over there. Became named in the New Zealand NBL All-Star 5, and I guess my question is, being part of that league and playing in the Australian NBL, we see the Australian NBL is probably a lot better than the New Zealand NBL, but what are the difference between the two leagues, just to finish up in your time in New Zealand there?
Yeah, look, obviously the Australian NBL is, a lot better than New Zealand NBL. But the New Zealand NBL, the comparison is to NBL 1 over here. And it would be interesting, the best of each. I think some of the top New Zealand NBL teams would beat the top NBL 1 teams, just because, they tend to have a lot of the good New Zealand players, and then they'll have some imports in that are, sometimes quite good, and then a couple of the Australian players go as players import. So, that league's fun. I really loved it. They have good coaches now. It's starting to get better and better coaches. But so you got Bevo at Southland. I had John Dorge at Harbour Heat. Judd Flavel was coaching in Southland, I think, before that. Dylan Boucher, I believe, probably, GM, player, coach, absolutely everything over there. Probably a water boy as well at some stage. But yeah, those games are fun because you fly into a different town, or you travel to a different city in New Zealand. Then you play, you'll go out, you have see the sights, and then you fly back the next day. Good crowds, good games, and pretty intense. So I have fond memories of it because I think it was a good stage of my career. I also went back over there at the end of my career when I just about to retire. I'd hurt my knee. I needed surgery, and then a team over there, one of the guys I know, they're like, "Oh, can you come play?" And I was like, "My knee's pretty banged up. I haven't been able to do anything." And they're like, our import's not getting on a plane yet. They just cancelled. We need someone. We've got 5 games in a week and a half or something, or 2 weeks. And I said, sure. I just couldn't. I got over there, and it was a terrible decision for me. It was fun.
Really?
Absolutely loved it. Still great people. I just couldn't move. I couldn't run up and down the court. I was heavily taped. I believe I think I shot 3 of 26 from the 3-point land, and just could not make a thing. Couldn't move. But my early years over there, absolutely loved it. It's more for a younger. So I think for any of the young NBL players, absolutely they should in their off season go over and play over there, because it's a fantastic league for development, and it's a really fun league to play in. In your latter years, go on holidays, enjoy it, because there's a long time where you're only going to get a few weeks off a year. Yeah. When you have that off season, when you can travel around Australia, see Australia. Early on, definitely, I think NBL players should be playing the off season.
For sure. Just while you're talking, bit of an idea that floated in my head. Can you ever see the possibility, going back to soccer now with the FA Cup and the lower teams playing against the A-League teams, is there any possibility you think of like a Champions League type format, maybe involving New Zealand NBL clubs and NBL clubs or NBL 1 clubs? Do you see that getting off the ground at all? Or I think it'd be a great concept if it could happen.
Oh, it'd be great. I think was it around 2000s, they had the McDonald's Cup, where it was like the winner of each league played over somewhere in Europe. So I remember
that's right.
one year, the Sixers went over there, and there's a bunch of European, of course, the NBA team will win it, but that was quite interesting. And then around about the same time, I remember the league of all the NBL, so now it'd be like NBL 1, West, East, whatever, would all come off and play each other. Because I remember we won in Adelaide for Sturt, and we were about to come over and play Seabull, a bunch of the Seabull teams, and bring out West over. And that's the year Ansett went down, because we're flying Ansett. We're all about to get to the airport, and one of our teammates, he started driving across to Melbourne, and to the airport, announced that Ansett's just gone under. The whole thing's cancelled, and so I think he got to Horsham or something and had to turn around. Gosh. And then the second year it happened too. So the first year, and then the second year it got cancelled, because we had a good team the first year. We had a bunch of the young Sixers on there, and the second year we were stacked. And that's when it cancelled. And we're like, that was our shot at trying to, it was always the Seawolf team that won it.
Yeah.
But we had a stacked team in the SA Premier League back then.
Yeah. No, yeah, I just think it'd be a great concept. I remember the old ABA, had a similar concept where, the top teams would come together, and Mighty Southern Sharks had a crack one year, and my old club with BJ Carter and co. I just think it'd be a great concept to sort of work towards some sort of Champions League type format. And, I think as a player, you want to play against the best. And, if it's not European clubs at the moment with COVID or NBA clubs, just having the opportunity to play against New Zealand NBL, whatever the case may be. I remember myself when I was playing against a team from the US and Canada, and it's just a great experience all around. So something like that would be pretty epic, I believe. But
for sure.
Just going into your transition into the Illawarra Hawks, where you spent the later stages of your career, and no doubt a great experience playing such a prestigious club. I guess one of the only foundation clubs left in the league. What was that experience like, and playing under Gordy McLeod, as you said, Rob Beveridge, and then finishing your career there? No doubt fond memories playing for the Illawarra Hawks.
Yeah, absolutely. Rocked up, and I remember I was from New Zealand. I said, okay, so who's our footwear sponsor? They're like, East Bay. I was like, that's cool, they sponsor us. He goes, no, just you go buy shoes from East Bay. I was like, right. So it was really like kind of the poor team of the league.
Yeah.
It was absolutely, it was just like same as what Wollongong and the Illawarra is. It was just a blue class team. Working class. We don't get paid good, don't get paid well. But we work hard, we stay together, and that's all. It was always that. And, every time we had to, that's why going up against, say, Sydney was probably the better games, because, you play Cairns or Townsville, and it's like, okay, you guys understand what we've got to go through to survive. And each year, you're not sure if you're going to stay in the league or your team's going to fold. There's no point in signing, 5-year deals there, because the team might not live for 5 years. But you do play up against Sydney, and, the people that would come to Sydney to watch games generally weren't those diehard supporters, and, so you could silence the crowd pretty easily, hit a few shots, and, the whole crowd takes the crowd out of it, and then you knew you had the game. So playing up against those bigger teams was really fun. Look, the teams went through obviously multiple name changes and owners and everything, and then it went from, okay, we don't get paid much money here, but we always get paid on time, and we work our butts off. And then it went from okay, we don't know if we even get paid. There were, at the end of some seasons where our contracts just got cut, and we were 3 months without any income, and that they were pretty trying times. And then is the team going to exist? And then all contracts got ripped up, and I know people were just having babies and all sorts of stuff. I remember I was a captain one year, and I remember calling all the team. I said, all right, quick, everyone's got to come to my house. We've got a meeting. And one of the guys saying, it's my wife's birthday. I've just bought her this, and I'm just to this. And I was like, you might want to return that. Don't know if you can afford it, mate.
Wow.
Just, news has come through that I'm just talking with the NBL now, and club's going under, and the owners, because we just gone to a private ownership, and so, they're excited about that. And then it went to, got an owner that's got some money, and then it's went to, okay, the owner doesn't want to put some money into decided that the players don't deserve any money. So look, you're on, and then we had to decide whether we're going to, there's other seasons where it was, paychecks weren't coming through, and we're trying to work out whether to play our final game against Sydney to try and make it it was us or Sydney to go into the playoffs, and had half the team saying, no, we're not playing unless we get money, and half the team saying, yep, we play anyway, and how do we do this? And so going, there was, I remember half time would come back into at half time of the game, would go back in the change room, and everyone was like, wait, checking their bank accounts. Are we getting paid? Are we not? What's happening? Are we over? Because there was talk that if we made the playoffs, we wouldn't be able to travel anywhere anyway.
Yeah.
The board members at the time, we had Pete Ballman and Bill Dowson and Tanya Brown, and they were working endlessly behind the scenes to make sure that something could be done, that money could come from somewhere that we could actually, because it was bittersweet. We had a meeting the day of the game of, we're trying to work out with the NBL whether we can play, And, we weren't sure until game time. Even at game time, we weren't sure if we won the game, we'd go to the playoffs. We didn't know if we could actually play in the playoffs because we didn't know if we could fly to wherever we were. So, or have a hotel or whatever we were doing. So, look, there were times that I'm sure, people would have no idea that existed, or, the crowd had no idea about it. But, I know we came out and we absolutely smacked Sydney at home one game, and I think that was just straight. We're in the warm-up, and one of the players said to me, "Is like, is that one of the owners? Is that someone? Do we go ask him where, are we going to play the playoffs or what's going on?" And it was just talk about distractions. There was some interesting times and interesting games. But look, the teams somehow survived in one form or one name or another, and it actually is good to be going back to games and even commentating at them. So I'm involved somehow to go to games and see them survive, and hopefully under this new model and under Gorge it can keep progressing and getting better and stronger.
Absolutely. And I guess over the years, as you said, it's been so tumultuous in terms of ownership structures, and I guess long term it's not a great model if it's going to survive. So hopefully the ownership can get it right this time. But what, I guess, in your opinion, what is it going to take to get the Hawks up to that next level? You're seeing some of these clubs really take it to the next level in terms of attendance and sponsorship. It just seems like the Hawks really struggle to, I guess, we were there the other night chatting, and obviously the crowd and the supporters are passionate. It just seems that every year,
a number of them.
Yeah. What is it in your opinion?
I think the good thing with this new ownership this year is they haven't come in and said, "I'm taking the team to Bendigo or wherever." They've come in and said, "We are keeping the team here." And so it's, for the next year or two at least, and the community gets to decide. And I know there are a lot of people up in arms about, you're going to take the team. Well, if after 2 years people don't come out and visit and go to the games and support, then you can't be upset if the team is gone. In my opinion, if you come out and support, the owners won't take the team anywhere. They'd be stupid to, and they don't want to. From my understanding, the team is in Wollongong and the team is going to stay here. But if it's not viable, it can't keep being a team that's on its knees every time. So if people do support it, it'll stay. So I think part of the worry is when you do have, Tuesday night or Thursday night game, and, even some of the Saturday or Sunday night games, stadium's pretty empty. I understand with COVID and everything going on, and, it's hard to see the schedule ahead of time because there are always changes, with COVID happening. But the people do, if they actually do want the team to stay, they need to support it. And secondly, it's going to be really interesting to see what the ownership group does for next year, because this year they kind of came a little bit in late in the piece, and they didn't poach any players from other teams. They had, Digadell was a marquee that didn't work out, but he was a marquee player that was still available on the market. Cam Bairstow, he was available. He was floating around. AJ, they got as an injury replacement after everything had started, basically. So the team they put together was, a couple of imports and then whoever they had around. They didn't poach anyone from any other clubs. They didn't get any of the other, youngsters coming back from anywhere because they weren't early enough in the piece. So I think this first off-season, and the next thing is this off-season is going to be very short for them. This off-season is going to be short. Like Gorge at the Olympics, and Gorge is going to basically go from, if they make playoffs, go from playoffs to Olympics straight back into season, not even pre-season.
True.
So it's going to be a very tough off-season for them. But it's also, it'll be really interesting to see what they will be able to do with the first year of actually being able to recruit, in a market, rather than going and with saying, "Hey, this is our coaches, this is what we've got," rather than we actually don't know who it is. So they've got their model. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And then if they do recruit and have a team similar to, the Melbournes or the Sydneys or Southeast Melbourne or whatever, then seeing what sort of support comes out, that's where it really comes back onto Illawarra and whether they want to come out and watch, because on Sunday I wouldn't call it an amazing crowd, and that was that's their 8th win in 9 matches. So I went to the Melbourne game, and the Melbourne they're playing the top team, and it was a Thursday night, I think.
Yeah, it was.
Playing the top team. It'd be great to see Melbourne play, and that's why I went. And the crowd was very, very low, and that was on the back of 4 wins in a row, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it does come down to, one, can the ownership group put a model on the court that is going to be competitive and what they actually want, and be able to recruit in that market, and 2, are people going to come and support it and watch what's produced on the court.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope they, put it all together. I guess the thing in their favour is having Coach Gorge there, Brian Gorge, and he'd no doubt be able to attract some good players. And to see the effect LaMelo Ball had, so having someone of that ilk, of that sort of name, even if it's like a Matthew Dellavedova who comes back or someone like that, would be a huge boost for the club. And let's hope they can continue on the trajectory they're going. But just to finish up, a couple more questions, I guess. In my time playing the sport, I learned a lot about life, I guess, that I was able to apply to my workplace now and life in general. So having played the sport at a high level, and this is another question I'd like to ask my guests, what have you been able to apply to your life? What have you learned from the sport that you've taken into your career now with University of Wollongong, where you're working now, and commentating, corporate speaking, whatever the case may be? Is there anything that sort of stands out as a virtue or something from playing the sport that you've been able to apply to life today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of the important things are habits, being able to build habits and realising that they are an important thing. When you hear about, in the Army or the Navy, you make your bed, and the importance is that you are able to tick something off your list straight away, and at worst you come back to a made bed, at night. Yeah. So building habits, being able to understand like the habit of working out and how being healthy, how that kind of helps everything. Yeah. But I think for me it was networking. I always knew, playing in the NBL wasn't going to, make you rich and help you retire or anything like that. But what I was going to do is open doors. You would be in a room with a lot of influential people that actually wanted to talk to you. And a number of times with teammates would, stand in the corner and be like, we've got a promo, we don't want to do this. The time's going to tick regardless. You're there whether you like it or not. It's part of the job. And really showing people you're accessible and actually being able to network and be personable. I found something that I worked on, and I would then, in my later years of my career, I would try and work with younger players and be like, hey, look, this is how we actually do network, or this is how we can open conversations and doors. And I found that, as well as public speaking. I think it's hilarious that my sister, as an accountant, paid to do a Toastmasters course to learn how to speak publicly, when I was, as a 19-year-old, have the microphone shoved in your face and you're expected to, stuff up a couple of times and then get it after that. And I remember even, one of the years with Wollongong here, the reporters came down, and all the sports reporters were actually on holiday or annual leave at the same time, and so they sent down these 2 little girls that would come down, and they'd usually just behind the desk, and they never did the sports. And they came up and they said, Oscar, we actually don't know anything about basketball. We've got to do it. And I said, it's okay, interview me first. Got a little milk crate, said stand on the milk crate. And all you're going to do is take the snippet from us talking anyway. They're not going to take your question. So if you don't have a question, put the microphone to your face, put it to us, and you watch what happens. And so I went first, and, they do this, and we're playing Perth, and they put the microphone to me, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely good question. Look, what we're looking forward to when we play Perth is, Sean Reggie's attacks. We've got to defend that as a group, and you rattle on about that. Yeah. And they just do it again, and then we raise something else. So I talked to the team, and I said, look, this week we've got no questions coming. You talk about whatever you want. Yeah. Just keep it informative. Yeah. And it was kind of wow. That's, everyone was like, right, we can speak confidently and, publicly and quite easily. And so I think networking and then public speaking were tools that a lot of people don't work out. And then when I was in the business world, I would find out that if I went to a meeting I wasn't nervous about producing any content because I knew that if I knew my stuff and I had actually done my work, I could speak confidently about it. And presenting to, you're presenting to a board of 10 people. That's nothing if you're playing in front of, I'd much rather do that than play in front of 13,000 at Perth, because at least these board members probably don't hate you and want to stab you. Perth fans, I know what they want to do to you. So, it kind of made me realise that, all those years where I just was doing my job, you actually learn a lot of tools for outside of basketball and, understand what makes people tick and how to influence people, or how to, how to present to people, how teams network and how teams work. And so if you are in a corporate office, you understand how to be a team player and how things work, because you've done it under usually a higher pressure situation than, at the water cooler.
Yeah. That's awesome, mate. Some great insights there. Thanks for sharing that. Well, just as we finish up, some quick fire questions just around your career and I guess players you played with, etc. But what's your greatest achievement in your career so far?
In my basketball career would probably be winning most improved player for the NBL after getting fired from a team.
Yeah, I was meant to ask you about that. It's a great achievement, obviously. Best player you played against?
I reckon Chris Williams from the Sydney Kings days. He was pretty tough. Couldn't shoot, so you back up. Next thing you know, you're in the paint and he shoots a little bunny over you.
Very good. Great player in his time, and God rest his soul. But I guess best player you played with?
Many. I'm thankful for my time in Wollongong to be able to play with Matt Campbell and Glenn Saville to see what they do and the work they put in to make sure they got everything out of their bodies. Carlos Powell in New Zealand, he was incredible. He was a tough player to play, and it was tough to play against and for other people, and tough to play with. He was a very, very difficult teammate. Great talent, but very difficult to play with as well.
Last from the past there, Carlos Powell. Last two, toughest opponent you played against, or a person you hated matching up against in your career?
There's probably four of them, actually. Sean Ridge and his three referee mates. They were you'd play against him. He was allowed to travel. He was allowed to push off. He was allowed to foul you. He was allowed to run into you when it was your foul. You were allowed to run into him, but it was your foul. And I remember I spoke to one of the referees before the game, and I said, Sean Reddy travels every time he catches the ball, and he said, yes, but he's so good at it. And I said, so what is your aim? You're just going to wait for him to retire, and then you don't have to worry about it? He goes, yes. And I was like,
wow,
I don't know how I can do with this.
Sponsor that. Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. Wouldn't have thought that one. All right. And finally, best memory doesn't need to necessarily be the best achievement, or could be something off the court. What's your best memory in your time playing pro ball?
Taking Delhi to go see the Christ Redeemer in Brazil on an Australia tour with the coaching staff, when all the other players basically just sat in the room. But Delhi was a young fella, and I said, come on, let's go. We're here. Let's experience it. Game's not till later. And just incredible. The fact that we were, have the opportunity is, had plenty of opportunities in Australia, but the fact that, we were flying to another country and got to see things people dream of seeing just before we actually do our job. Take the opportunity. Why not?
Yeah, that's cool. Epic stuff. Well, thanks, mate. It's been great hearing your story and share some of, I guess those memories, but also those life lessons that you've learned from playing as well. So appreciate your time, Oscar, and hopefully see the game soon, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.